Real Asian Film Festival. So with that said, I'd like to introduce and bring to our opening panel a number of special guests here today. First, I'd like to invite Jeannette, who's a Canadian documentary filmmaker. You can just come up and have a seat here at our panel. Jeannette is the filmmaker who will be screening 2 of her films today that you've seen. And she'll be joining us on a panel in a discussion on home. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Keith Lowe here. And I'll get into more of his background in a second. And of course, I'd like to invite Gauri, who will be joining us and will be performing with some musicians shortly after the 2 films that we see from Jeannette. So please give them a round of applause, and we'll have a nice conversation together. So I'd like to just say quickly a few words about each of these incredible people here that we have. To start with, on my right, Dr. Keith Lowe. He doesn't need an introduction, but I'll do one anyway. You know, one of the things that he talked about when he came to Canada in 1979, and he talked about this idea of a global village. Canada is a great place to build a global village. And I think an event like today is definitely, it epitomizes what he meant a number of years ago, that we're able to have such a great opportunity to celebrate different cultures in this country. He's the recipient of the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal in 2002. And over his illustrious career, he's been focused primarily on education, multiculturalism, and community service. He has organized and has spearheaded a number of incredibly integral conferences and symposia on topics of multiculturalism. And we're so honored to have him here this afternoon with us. Thank you. Next, further down, is Jeannette, and her feature film, Finding Samuel Lowe, opened at the ReelWorld Film Festival last year and was the recipient of many accolades. She is a documentary film maker and is the owner of Miss Chin Productions, based in Toronto. And we're so honored to have 2 of her short films that will be screening right after this panel. So without further ado, Jeannette. And finally, but not least, of course, is the great Gauri Guha, who is one of the most accomplished North Indian classical musicians of our time, and it is an honor to have her here with us today. She has been the recipient of endless awards, and unfortunately we don't have enough time to go into each of them. But we are so honored to be able to listen to her and her musicians perform after the films today, and so please do stick around for that. Again, Gauri Guha. So we thought it was important to start today off with this panel, and the first question, and what I'll do is I'll sort of start it off with you, Gauri, because you have written a number of songs for South Asian cinema over the years, and I'm just curious to know, a very simple question, when you talk about using music in storytelling, and as we look at this context of home, this idea of home, how does music relate to storytelling in your work? How does that contribute to the film in your mind?
Thanks for asking that question. It's not very easy to answer, but I'll answer in my own way. The music is completely associated with life. There cannot be any music without having life around, in itself, it's a lively thing. Music.
Sorry, can you speak to the microphone?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. What I was saying, that music is connected, closely connected with life. So when you talk about life, and particularly classical music, it came from life. It came from nature. It came from the chirping of the birds or the ocean's waves. So once it is so embedded in our classical music, that reflects life. It has sadness in it, it has happiness in it. The moods, particularly classical ragas, expresses the particular mood of a person's feelings and emotions. So if you keep that in mind, transferring it into anything which has life in it, like home is what you make it to be. Your home can be anywhere. All your feelings, all your emotions, all your day-to-day activities are confined in your home, so as in life. So that's the way I feel very comfortable connecting both of them.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask a different question to you, Jeannette, because your work has focused a lot on, I guess, the duality of leaving one place or being in search of another destination. I'm wondering, that theme that sort of that thread through your work, where did that come from? And why are you telling these stories of home, essentially, and in search, and what are you searching for?
For those of you who don't know a lot about my work, it's about the Hakka community in Jamaica. Hakka, you can find the Hakka community around the world. The Hakka went to India, for instance. There's a lot of Moyen Hakka people in India. In Jamaica, most of the Chinese in Jamaica are Hakka. And I wanted to explore that world because a lot of us left Jamaica in the early 70s. And so that world, in a way, doesn't exist anymore. And I wanted to make sure that the history has been recorded and documented. And I think that more and more of us, even though I might look Asian, I might look, be able to tell that I'm Chinese, many of us did another migration, like a two-stop migration before coming to Canada. So especially the Hakka, a lot of them came from India, like went from China to India to Toronto. We came from Kingston. There's people who came from like Suriname, like from China to Suriname to Toronto. Malaysia, it's the same thing. They might be Hakka. So it's this kind of community where we're Chinese, but where we have specific cultural traditions and values, and I wanted to make sure that those values and that culture is recorded. And how it interplays, though. I love the idea that we cross different cultures and then somehow we adapt, and then we also influence. So for me, I'm fascinated with the intersection of the two cultures. Thanks.
Dr. Lowe, could you tell us a little bit about, I guess, to start with, what you meant by global village? And secondly, so much of your work is rooted in ideas of multiculturalism. Why was that a fascination for you in your work and your study?
I have almost a similar background to Jeannette, although I'm quite a couple of decades older than her. But that journey of the Hakka to different parts of the world, their regrouping in Toronto was sort of fascinated me, that here we were in the world's most multicultural city, and we have a reassembly of Hakka who had gone to so many places and now congregated back here. And as you were noting, this was an opportunity to create not only a global village, but global villages. So I suppose the global village was in fact Marshall McLuhan's term, completely devoid of ethnicity. So modern media plays a role in it, and we can't escape that. In fact, we Hakka, who are the most earthly people in the world, are at the same time the most internet savvy people. So we do not attempt to escape the planetary nature of the world as we know it, the world which was first seen as a whole when the notion of the global village came about in the 60s, further strengthened that notion. So we make the best of it, and there are neighborhoods and towns and cities which indeed contain these global villages, which are microcosms of whole worlds.
Thank you. To go back to you, Doctor, you mentioned the idea of when you spoke of global villages, could you talk to us a bit about the role of storytelling? You mentioned modern media and the role that has to play, and we can, in a minute, we'll talk to you, Jeannette, about the role of film. But is there, in terms of oral storytelling, in terms of creating identity and maintaining a connection to history, do you have any thoughts on the role that has played?
You're throwing to me, Keith? Okay.
You first.
Okay. In my films, I make a concerted effort to have, well, not with the first one, with the Chinese shop I didn't, but you hear a lot of Chinese-looking people who are Jamaican who speak patois, you know, like the Chinese people in the first film, The Chinese Shop, are the ones with the broadest Jamaican accents. And that's fascinating to me, the whole idea of, you know, how, like I said, how we're influenced by where we live. That gives us our identity, but then we also have our identity of being Chinese. So we have to exist in both. And, you know, I think it's very fascinating. And then I make a concerted effort in my films to have Hakka spoken, because in China, as it becomes a one-language country, Mandarin, these languages like dialects like Cantonese or Toisan or Hakka will start to disappear. And I believe, my own belief is that included in language is culture, right? It makes you who you are. So if it disappears, then there's a whole swath of like oral storytelling that disappears, because there are certain words in Hakka, you know, that say specific things, and it's so hard to translate that. Even going from Mandarin, from Hakka to Mandarin, you know, sometimes there's not even a translation. So definitely storytelling